Hey guys, it's Randy here from Lessons Learned. We're going to try something a little different today. It's just going to be me and Joe on, and we're going to try to do like just a little kind of clip segment thing. Joe, you know what we could call this?
What's that?
Lessons Learned, just the clip.
I see. I like it.
See what I did there? All right.
I get it. It's in
So,
just the tip, but just the clip. I
ah,
see.
all
I
right.
get it.
Joe, you missed our last recording,
I did.
and we talked about what to do when you kind of like lose your passion for your job and like kind of why that happens, how to combat that, what things that we've done in our lives are like what things we plan to do to try and make our situation a little bit better for us. So we really want to get your take on that. So let's hear it. What do you think about that?
All right. So what to do? So obviously, me and the rest of the gang are in the same situation where we're all in the military, right? So obviously, we're locked into a contract, which means if we hate our job, well, that's kind of unfortunate. We have to stick it out till the end of whatever years we have left or months. Um, For me, I have what do I have? I got about a year and a half left of my first contract, but I actually kind of love my job. I don't love what I do, but I do love the Air Force. So, I mean, I want to do the full 20 years. I don't know if the other guys feel the same way. I think they're still a bit iffy.
I
Uh,
know Chris used to, and I know he doesn't anymore.
yeah, exactly. He's like, I keep getting screwed over, but
Yeah.
I mean, he'll be at this 10-year mark. I would suggest him to stay in, but I don't know. Anyway, so what to do if you lose your passion? Well, I guess the first thing to talk about is what causes it. I mean, I
Right.
know bad leadership is always a great thing that will deter you from what
Absolutely.
you do. Absolutely, you got your bosses. Sometimes like you'll have a great supervisor who might move on, might go to a better spot, and then you have another guy who comes in and just not the same. And I
Yeah.
think yeah, that's a big thing where if somebody just kind of screws up the way that you've been doing it, doing your job, or just does something totally entirely different, that will really throw you off and make you hate what you love doing.
Yeah.
Um,
That definitely came up a lot in the episode, that
I figured it
particular
would.
fact. And another thing that kind of seemed to be a running theme was like kind of people getting paid the same amount or like, doing this like they're supposed to be the same job yet like say I for instance might be doing a ton more work than somebody else is yet we're getting paid the same, we're getting the same amount of recognition and like why
Right.
that can be frustrating. Is that something that you run into too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's for sure. Especially with the Air Force again. I know everything is going to keep coming back to the Air Force because that's what we know.
Right.
Um, but it's like, yeah. So there's one person in particular I'm remembering. It was a female in my workplace who just went above and beyond with everything that we did. Like she was doing leadership type roles, but as a lower enlisted person, getting the same amount of money as anyone else who was her rank. So it's like if you go above and beyond, you don't get any other reward. It's just a pat on the back, and that's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and
So
that
it's like
can
you can be a
be
scumbag and just just cruise right along, and you'll be fine.
exactly. And that can be really frustrating and demoralizing for, the hard workers and the people who want to earn it. And then that was something and now with the military and I think a lot of these things are things that can also be translated into the civilian world. And you see the same
Yep.
thing like they say that or the guys were all saying that one of the reasons that a lot of times the officers end up being people who aren't, necessarily good leaders are because they're those people who coasted along while the people who were the hard workers and who were the inspirational people ended up after a while saying like you know what fuck this I'm done I'm out I don't want to do this
Yep.
anymore so like they leave and then you get left with the people who kind of suck.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as a person who who goes above and beyond, does extra work, you see the people who are just like, yeah, lazy, just I I don't mean to be rude, but just lazy assholes who just don't want to put in any extra effort. Like you just look at them, you're like, why are you getting paid the same amount as me? I guess that
Yeah.
goes for any job that's base salary. Um,
Right.
yeah, even hourly stuff is the same thing. I know there's other jobs out there, normally trades works that will pay based on the amount of output you make, and that's really the incentive to work harder. And I think those jobs pay fairly, based on, you get paid what you produce. And I think that's a pretty good pay system, but it
I
just
think
would
so
not
too.
work Air Force wise.
Yeah, and I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration in the workplace more. I think in general. Um, and again, that's that's also something that kind of translates over to the civilian life. So that's why, like, I think it's totally fine. I mean, like that you guys your experiences with the Air Force, because I think a lot of the stuff you see in the civilian world as well, it's just like different. It's like the same, but it's different.
Right. Just, yeah, just a hair off.
So, all right, yeah. So we got into that. So then, after we kind of talked about that, we talked about like things that we can do. Like, I'll tell you, for instance, like I had a story where we actually had our CEO come in, and it was funny because like the way he asked it, he came in and he said, "What can we do to make the company better?"
Right.
And when he asked that like there were patients in the room, and it's like it was kind of in a controlled environment where like he knew he wasn't going to get a shitty response. But then the guys brought up a good point, and they said like, hey, he opened the door, like now's my opportunity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually write him an email and kind of
Yep.
say like, hey, you came in a couple weeks ago, you asked this question, I got to thinking about it, here's what I think. And, maybe it won't mean anything to him, and maybe it might actually change something. You never know. So, what are some avenues that you would take if you had a problem that you wanted to see changed?
Right. Okay. So I believe anyone who's a good leader or a good, how do I put it? Kind of boss, anyone who's above you, pretty much, right?
Yeah,
Anyone who kind of calls the shots. If they're a good person, they will listen to the feedback from their subordinates, anyone who's under them, any employees, I guess, for civilian world. And they will take those criticisms very seriously. Say, hey, I guess a good one actually that I hear a lot from Amazon. Amazon is notorious for having very bad treatment of their employees, right? I've heard
yeah, I've
stories
heard that
where,
too.
yeah, where it's like they're working in big warehouses, right? And they get a 15-minute break, but it takes 5 minutes to walk to the break room and 5 minutes,
Uh oh,
eat or
there we go.
sit down. Like that's kind of screwed up. So I mean, that's one of those things that you can route up to your leadership. Be like, hey, either extend my break or kind of like count my break time for when, I'm actually sitting down, I'm actually able to eat something. I don't know. I think that's just one example that kind of runs right off the top of my head.
Right.
Anyone who's above you that is like worth being a leader will listen to those criticisms and say, hey, yeah, no, that's a very fair point, and we should definitely do that to kind of improve morale in the
Right.
environment.
And the only way that things like that do get changed, and this kind of ended up being one of the running themes of the episode, was the only way that you're gonna get something done is if you have to have that hard conversation. You have to be brave enough to step out of line and kind of say, look, this is what's going on. You have to say it, because a lot of times just saying it can get things changed.
Absolutely.
Um, because what happens a lot of times is, the higher ups, they don't have these problems, so they don't think of these things. They
Yep.
don't know what goes on, on the ground floor. So it's like, all right, you know, you have to tell them that. Now it's up to them to make the changes, and then if they don't, and now this kind of leads into the final point a little bit. If they don't, that becomes when, this is when you have to decide, is this the place for me, or do I need to leave? And that was
Right.
kind of where the boys talked about, their reenlistments and whether they wanted to reenlist or not. I kind of talked about my experiences and like whether I want to look for new jobs or not. So what's your take on that part?
I guess it all depends on where you are in life. I mean, military is different from the civilian world with that. If you're a civilian, for example, right? Like let me take it back to my time at Red Nurse when I used to work there. It's a grocery store for anyone who doesn't know. Um, I kind of enjoyed my time there. I kind of moved up the management scale. I could have kept going further and further if I didn't have to. If I didn't want to go join into the Air Force. But say I hated, the corporate level, say I hated any of my bosses and they just kept making the same problems. And I said, hey, this is a problem. We should do things differently. And X, Y, and Z, this is why. And this is what will happen to make um, more positive improvements among us, and they just said, screw you. You don't know what you're talking about. You're below me." Then I'd be like, well, if you don't want to listen to my advice, well, then I guess I don't belong here, right? Um, so, I mean, with that being said, if you really love what you do, though, sometimes it might be worth sticking it out because people come and go, right? Say, hey, this person's not listening to me, and you kind of go above them and say, so say you go to your boss's boss, right?
Yeah.
And say, hey, and sometimes it's hard to reach out that far, but say, hey, this person, my boss isn't listening to me, X, Y, and Z. This is what we can do to improve. And then your boss's boss is like, this actually makes a fair point. And then they can kind of remove the middleman and hopefully create some improvements there. But sometimes you'll find yourself in places where that's just not a thing, right? Like people will just not listen to you because you're kind of a beginner, you're just a lesser, you're not one of the higher ups, so they just don't value your opinion. I think those are the places where you want to get out of.
Right, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for your input on that, Joe. Definitely made some interesting points. So for the rest of you guys, if you want to hear the rest of the guys' stories, if you want to hear my story, go check out the episode. Would have released earlier this week. And, buy our merch. We still got some shirts left. Yeah, we got them on. So reach out, DM us if you want to do that, and have a good day, guys.
Have a good one.